Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. When I'm sitting at my desk, you know that I have something serious of nature to present to you. Today, I am giving you my critical review of Race to the Bottom, How Racial Appeals Work in American Politics by LaFleur Stephens-Dougan. I told you guys that I was reading this book from my political psych class. So if anybody from class is watching this video, hey. Over the course of the book, Stephens-Dougan makes a lot of different claims, but one of the biggest ones is that any sort of political candidate, they all have to manage white voter emotions. So today we are going to unpack together what that means, what it looks like for elections, and some of the takeaways that I found as a researcher studying race and emotion. Race to the Bottom is not only one of the first political psych books that I read, I also think it is just one of the most important. This book is about how different political candidates, Black, white, Democrat, and Republican, use emotion and appeals to signal that they won't disrupt the racial status quo. Things that are institutional and structural, that are part of our everyday process in the US. It's not just about how they say it, it's about if they appear calm or neutral or safe. This is one of the first places I started to connect to my research regarding conversations about race in the classroom. Now I'm specifically looking at facilitators who lead that conversation. What participants are looking for is someone that's going to be safe, but also someone that they think is credible, and different things like that. This book, while talking about political psychology, it also helped me apply it to other social contexts, but we'll talk more about that a little bit later as well. So Stephens-Dougan's big concept that she is telling us about is racial distancing. That's when politicians use controlled language to soothe the potential guilt, anguish, fear, uncomfortability of white voters. And it's not necessarily about denying racism, but more so about prioritizing comfort and subsequently avoiding emotional discomfort. D.W. Sue is someone who has provided me with a lot of theoretical contributions and foundation for a lot of my work. He tells us that there are 3 academic and social norms that take place in the classroom and other educational spaces. So the first one is the academic protocol. That's when you feel the need to suppress intense emotions or feelings for the sake of being in an academic and intellectual space. That theory would suggest that if you feel very emotionally about a topic, then you are no longer able to communicate it effectively or, again, intellectually. The politeness protocol is the one that to me ties most closely to what Stephens-Dougan is talking about here. You'll just avoid it altogether because you know that this is a topic that can cause varying emotions, so just avoid it for the sake of keeping everyone comfortable. Lastly, the color blindness protocol, which we will spend a little bit more time on later. That is where people will avoid seeing each other's race. Race conversations or anything that deals with race, Sue tells us that it violates all 3 of those protocols. To talk about race, you need to allow people to express their emotions, whether that is in an academic space or not. You can't go around it, so you just can't skip it by being polite. Third, to have a conversation about race, you have to actively see color. You have to acknowledge patterns. You have to know that different people coming into a conversational space have different histories, backgrounds, partisanship, different things like that is affecting how they present themselves and also how they receive in these conversations. As I saw throughout the course of the book, more oftentimes than not, that comfort can matter more than policy. Candidates who reassure are rewarded, and sometimes candidates who challenge the system are not rewarded for that. The book also breaks down the emotional labor that Black candidates go through, not being able to show anger or frustration without potentially being labeled as aggressive. Meanwhile, some of their white counterparts can express the same emotions without any vindication. This is one of the ways that Stephens-Dougan shows us that white emotion can be at the center of politics again. There's a whole section of the book where she talks about Obama's campaign. We know Obama to be the first Black president, so obviously a lot of the things that he did were under a watchful eye and still being picked apart and criticized to this day. I think the author just did a good job, though, of showing you the actual evidence. This is how many times that Obama used these phrases in a speech to white people versus people of color, or here are the themes in his advertisements and campaigns. So one of my biggest qualms about, I guess, deciding who I am as a voter has been the idea that I don't think I've had the opportunity to explore both sides and to make judgments and decisions based on what I believed in, because both of my elections were Trump and somebody else. And so to me, it seemed like my answer was easy and it didn't matter what party this person was associated with. So I didn't feel like I had the same opportunity to develop a partisan identity that, you know, my parents may have had or older people may have had. So with that in mind, I asked my uncle. I was 8 when Obama was first running, and I don't know what was going on. So I asked him some of his feelings about phrases that Obama might have used in some speeches, like Cousin Pookie or Uncle Ray Ray, different things like that. Obviously, he cannot speak for an entire community, but one thing he said that stood out to me was that growing up, they did have a Cousin Ray Ray and an Uncle Pookie, or vice versa. So Obama was speaking to them, even though on paper, the things that Obama was saying did appeal to negative stereotypes about African Americans. When it comes to emotions, they can be so complex and convoluted because you have these negative stereotypes that you can see through thematic analysis. That does not necessarily translate to a educated African American man feeling like you're speaking down on him. Again, that's just one example that's not speaking for everyone, but I think that shows the complexities of emotions involved in politics, especially now that we see it's becoming a little bit more diverse. There are still these structural things that politicians specifically have to work through in order to gain the trust of the white voter, who we said before is upholding the system. She argues that even our normal emotions like civility, neutrality, and even optimism are still political. And every time that a politician engages in them, they are reinforcing the moral standard of white comfort. Candidates who make voters feel calm are seen as presidential, while those that are more challenging of ideas, who make people uncomfortable, can be labeled as radical. Emotion isn't just part of politics, it's also built into the ideology. In psychology, we know that emotion drives more than just logic. What Stephens-Dougan adds to this conversation is that emotions are also racialized. The discomfort of the average white voter can become a boundary for what's even possible politically. I'm just giving a brief overview of the book, so I do recommend going back to read all of the different ways that she does this. Overall, Race to the Bottom has taught me that emotion is not just a personal and private thing when it comes to politics. It's built into the policy and something that you need to understand to be able to understand how it's working. I gotta say that I didn't see how emotion would need 2 weeks to discuss in a political psychology class, because the emotions that we reward and reinforce in our leaders, elites, and politicians or thought leaders, the people that we are actively looking to, those emotions tell us whose comfort matters, whose comfort we're prioritizing, and who is not being heard. The next time you label a candidate as being emotional or just doing something that you wouldn't expect, to think about who's being reassured in that and who is being silenced. Final thoughts and just things that I enjoyed. Very readable, very clear. I liked her writing style. She also used she when referring to politicians instead of he. I had to check my own bias a little bit because when I was reading, was expecting to just keep seeing he. That was a nice touch for her to switch those pronouns. And then just things that I enjoyed as a researcher. My field is social psychology. I've been telling myself I need to stay in my niche and stay in my lane, and that I don't want to be a political psychologist. I still don't know that that's what I want to do ultimately, but it can't hurt to understand other disciplines. And the way that things were connecting for me when I was reading this book, I wanted to revisit that idea of the colorblindness protocol that I mentioned earlier. It's to be colorblind, so when you're having the conversation, just ignoring race and ignoring patterns. And again, Sue tells us that a productive conversation about race cannot do that. So some of the different terms Stephens-Dougan used that I feel like I could apply to my knowledge and research: implicit and explicit racism, also content that's racialized and content that's deracialized. For me, that was a great starting point to learn more about how those things work in the political science literature. I have to get over myself and get through that phase of thinking that race is not political. Because if anything, this book showed me that race, emotion, most things in the US can be politicized. Reading this gave me a solid background on more that I want to look into in the future. If you're interested in political psychology, race, or just the role that emotions can play in our political system, I would highly recommend you reading Race at the Bottom. I will link it down in the description below. Other things that are in the description: my Instagram, TikTok, Goodreads, Book of the Month, and some other little things. So make sure you check those out. I'm so excited to be sharing more of my academic reads with you guys. I am on a journey to actually know the literature that I'm speaking about. I will continue to share with you books like this and articles that I read as we progress. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.